Under the cover of a quiet, snowy night, a solitary cabin stands desolate. Inside, the remnants of a fateful toast lay scattered on the floor. A glass, once filled with wine, now only bears a stain, a testament to the poison that it once harbored. Our hero, a long-haired blonde named Ian, is the unfortunate victim of this treacherous act. He faces the architect of his impending doom, a man of regal stature. With your might, I had to make the poison stronger. You have mere minutes, Ian, the regal man declares with a strained voice, betraying both his trepidation and guilt. As the realization of betrayal sinks in, Ian searches his tormentor's face for answers. Why has an ally turned into an enemy? You're a force to be reckoned with, Ian, he confesses. Your power dwarfs everyone in the Empire. It's caused unrest among the citizens and cost many their livelihoods. Your magic, Ian, it terrifies me. An apology drips from the man's lips as he steps back, the weight of his actions bearing down on him. He departs into the snowy abyss, leaving Ian alone in the dying warmth of the cabin. Betrayed, poisoned, and now alone, Ian is dying. But as the flames begin to dance around the cabin, he unveils his final gambit. Hidden within his shirt, he pulls out a dagger, an ancient relic imbued with time magic. His research told him of this artifact's power. If he can pierce his own heart before the poison does, he could reverse his fate. As the memories of his past failures flood his senses, Ian drives the dagger into his chest. The ground beneath him illuminates with an ethereal blue light, forming cryptic symbols, as otherworldly voices echo around him. He sees the milestones of his life flash before him. His mother's passing, his first meeting with the Emperor, the image of crows feasting on a battlefield. When he comes to, he finds himself in the smaller, weaker body of his childhood. No wounds mar his flesh. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls his name. Spinning around, he's met with the sight of his long-dead mother, her golden hair spilling over a corset. He gasps, her presence confirming his success. He has indeed returned to the past, to a time when his mistakes were yet to be made, and his mother was still alive. He pivots, drinking in the panorama unfurling around him. A pristine white tent, crowned with a matching white flag, stands firm in the center. Outside its inviting confines, a sea of children gathers, their faces alive with anticipation and fear. They stand in regimented lines, their fate to be determined by the assessments conducted by the spiritual knights. His plan has been successful. Ian is no longer the dying man, gasping out his last breaths in a world soaked with regret. Now, he's a child once more, gifted with a second chance to reshape his destiny. Magicians, the bedrock upon which the empire of this nation is built. Every child reaching the age of 12 faces a critical rite of passage, the Mana Reaction Assessment. It's a test of two parts. The first examines the Mana Brain, the crux of magic manifestation, while the second probes the Mana Heart, the engine of magic generation and control. Children who demonstrate both these talents are welcomed into the prestigious Magic Academy. Upon graduation, they bask in the status akin to nobility. Ian, having journeyed 30 years back in time, finds himself on the brink of this very assessment. His past self had painstakingly researched the dagger that had ironically been on his person at the time of his death. His obsession with manipulating time was fueled by a desperate need to wash his hands, stained with the blood of countless victims. His loyalty had belonged to Emperor Ragnar, a man he'd considered a friend. But the bitter truth had been unveiled when he was discarded, used and thrown away like a trivial pawn. Ian had learned his lesson. He was determined to rewrite his future. With a newfound resolve, Ian bids his mother farewell and strides confidently towards the spiritual knights. He addresses a guard, introducing himself as Ian Page of Magrian Village. The guard acknowledges him, recognizing him as the son of Venice A, and welcomes him into the tent with a word of advice, to refrain from bombarding the magician with too many questions. Within the tent's confines stands the magician, a striking figure with long ebony hair tied in a ponytail. He instructs Ian to lower his head, intending to stimulate his brain with mana. A temporary wave of dizziness washes over Ian, subsiding as swiftly as it had come. The magician's face splits into a knowing smile. He has discovered the presence of both a mana brain and a mana heart within Ian, prophesying a promising future for him. Ian's reaction is stoic, perhaps because he had been anticipating this. His ambition doesn't stop at the academy gates. With a spark of showmanship, he ignites a fireball in one hand, while skillfully manipulating water with the other, simultaneously casting 2 spells. With a casual shrug, he informs the startled magician that this was a skill he had serendipitously stumbled upon one day. In disbelief, the magician questions Ian, "Are you sure no one taught you that spell?" When Ian replies in the negative, the magician's demeanor changes. Leaning in, his gaze pierces into Ian, urging him to be truthful. Equipped with a unique magic to detect lies by interpreting the body's physiological reactions, the magician warns Ian against deceit. Their intense exchange, however, is disrupted by the shrill screams of Ian's mother from outside the tent. Vanessa, Ian's mother, is seen in a skirmish with a guard who had been stationed outside their tent. The guard, disrespectfully gripping her arm, mocks her widowhood, a status she has held for 7 years, and accuses her of playing hard to get. Enraged at this public commotion, the magician, along with 2 knights, storm out of the tent, demanding an explanation. The guard, paralyzed with fear, dismisses the situation as a mere misunderstanding with a lowly kitchen maid, which only adds fuel to Ian's rage. The audacity of this guard to belittle his mother sends Ian into a frenzy. However, before he can act, the magician steps in, enlightening the guard that Ian's newfound power of mana elevates him and his family to nobility, and an insult to the nobility is a capital offense, punishable by execution. The guard, panic-stricken, falls to his knees begging for mercy, both from the magician and Vanessa, profusely apologizing for his earlier disrespectful remarks. With a steely gaze, Ian steps up to the cowering guard, issuing a stern warning that he is well aware of the repulsive behavior he and his comrades have displayed towards his mother. He threatens the guard, ensuring he conveys the same message to his comrades, that should they dare to repeat such behavior, he wouldn't hesitate to seek retribution. The guard, trembling with fear, nods in understanding. As the guard sweats in terror, the irony is not lost on him. A 12-year-old has just instilled fear into his heart. Appreciative of the magician's intervention, Ian thanks him. The magician dismisses his gratitude, stating that it's his duty to protect fellow magicians. He then introduces the man standing next to him as Lord Aaron. Distinguished by his mustache and the white cape billowing behind him, Lord Aaron would serve as their guardian while their new status was being formalized. He informs Ian that they would be residing temporarily in an inn housing the Night Order. Hand in hand with his mother, Ian agrees to follow Aaron, ready to embark on the next chapter of their extraordinary life. Observing the young lad's departure, the magician finds himself secretly marveling at the prodigious intellect and prowess the boy possesses. The magician is so astounded, in fact, that he feels compelled to bring this remarkable youth to the attention of the Imperial family. As nightfall blankets the town, silence pervades the streets. The disgraced guard from earlier staggers down the dimly lit lanes, inebriated and seething with resentment. His ego bruised, he broods over the audacity of a mere child, and a humble kitchen maid bringing him, a guard, to his knees. He swears to himself, fueled by the venom of humiliation, to exact revenge on Vanessa in an unsavory way. As he stews in his foul intentions, an enigmatic figure cloaked in a hood stalks behind him. The figure casts a spell of paralysis, freezing the guard mid-step on a bridge. The hooded figure reveals himself as Ian, his heart boiling with fury having overheard the repulsive plans for his mother. Throwing off his hood, Ian begins to weave a plausible narrative for the guard's impending demise, a story of humiliation, alcohol, and an accidental death by drowning. As the paralyzed man stands teetering on the edge, Ian nudges him into the water, impassively watching him drown. Struggling with his conscience, Ian ponders the morality of his actions. Wasn't his whole purpose of rewinding time to become a better person? But as he stares into the distance, he comes to a bitter realization. Some stains, like blood on his hands, may never wash off entirely. The best he could strive for is to shield the ones he treasures most, his mother, for instance. The sight of the guard's lifeless body bobbing in the water evokes memories of his own betrayal in his previous life, when the Emperor had left him to die in a remote cabin. A sense of fatigue washes over him as he heads back home, his mana severely depleted from casting the paralysis spell. As he gazes at his sleeping mother, he resolves to hasten his physical growth. In his past life, he'd achieved the status of a first-class magician after a mere year in the Magic Academy. Yet, despite his success, his mother lived a life devoid of comfort and died prematurely. This time, Ian promises to protect her, to ensure her a longer, better life. The scene transitions to a grand, majestic building, the heart of the Green River Empire. Within its regal confines resides the Emperor of Green River, Terry. The man is an image of elegance, a blonde vision wrapped in sumptuous attire. His mustache, equally blonde, adds a dash of sophistication. He's locked in deep discourse with another magician named Herbert, their topic of discussion being our unsuspecting protagonists. Herbert elucidates on the nature of mana, an intrinsic life force coursing through the bloodstream. Once an individual sprouts a mana brain and mana heart, they are welcomed into the world of magicians. However, harnessing this mana to weave magic requires meticulous training. The curiosity here, though, is our protagonist who somehow manipulates magic with no formal training. He likens our protagonist to a figure of legend, the first magician. A trailblazer who unraveled the mysteries of mana on his own, and consequently earned the title of the first magician. The idea of a modern individual freely wielding magic without the cradle of an academy is so incredulous that even Terry, the blonde man, dismisses it with a scoff. Yet, Herbert confesses to a lingering seed of doubt and resolves to confirm the truth with his own eyes. The Emperor, shrouded in his thoughts, realizes the potential threat such an ability could pose. Outside, a young man has been eavesdropping. Hayden, the Prince of Green River. At the Emperor's call, he steps inside, questioning the reason for the summons. Terry advises his son to venture beyond the castle walls, emphasizing it's been 5 years since he last did so. Indeed, the prince should embrace the world outside. Terry then entrusts him with a vital mission. He would be accompanied by 300 soldiers and 3 magicians on a journey to retrieve a boy named Ian Page. The Emperor harbors a fleeting doubt, but Hayden convinces him of his capabilities and swears to fulfill the task. And with that, preparations are to begin post-haste. However, the road to Magrian is long and grueling. Herbert, still present, jests about finding willing magicians to accompany the prince outside. His face turns grave once he exits the room. His assistant inquires if he's heading back to the tower for magicians. Herbert replies in the negative, his gaze focused on the path ahead. There's another place he must visit first. Our scene shifts back to our protagonist's dwelling. Standing at the window, Ian peers outside, expecting company. He knows the Imperial family will seek him out soon, everything falling into place as predicted. His magic must have sparked fascination in the magician, leading to reports escalating to higher authorities. The Emperor, now alerted, would surely dispatch the prince along with a contingent of soldiers. Ian also suspects the inevitable arrival of Herbert. In the commanding heights of the Ivory Tower, a clandestine conflict brews. A clash between the Imperial castle and the tower itself is but an inevitability. Ian, the tower's master, is all too familiar with this looming schism from his past life. However, he remains uncertain about where his allegiances might lie. His only certainty is a refusal to be anyone's pawn. His introspection is abruptly disrupted by an unexpected early arrival, the Imperial Order. A previously encountered magician, now holding a magical orb, greets him at the doorstep. The orb is the conduit for the Emperor's decree, so, as tradition mandates, Ian kneels, fists solemnly over his chest. As the ethereal message materializes from the orb, the magician reads it aloud. The Emperor, it seems, has been intrigued by the prodigious talents of Ian Page, and as such, offers recognition as a certified magician of the Empire. His name is to be etched in the Ivory Tower's registry. Furthermore, an invitation is extended for Ian to grace the Imperial castle with his presence, with the Emperor's eldest son serving as his guide. No sooner has the message been delivered than a knight, Arnold by name, approaches. Arnold informs Ian that he and his comrades have been charged with the esteemed duty of accompanying Ian to the Imperial castle. Meanwhile, in anticipation of Ian's arrival, the Magrian territory's lord, Marcus, bedecked in a fur coat and sporting a full beard, cautions his children about their manners. Ian's youth notwithstanding, he's a mage who has caught the Emperor's attention. Making a good impression is crucial to Marcus. He thus warmly welcomes the protagonist into his castle. The following weeks see Ian becoming a sensation in the castle, his young age and astonishing ability to create fireballs from his hands, even capturing the maid's admiration. most of Ian's time is spent in the training grounds, his hand upraised, invoking a frost nova with consummate ease. It's apparent that his time in the castle has also seen an upgrade in his wardrobe. His magic works, and in an instant, the training grounds are blanketed in ice and snow. Yet Ian's satisfaction eludes him. His past self could have transformed the entire castle into a winter wonderland, not merely the training grounds. Frustrated by the limitations of his current body and scarce mana, he yearns for a way to augment his powers. Just then, an interruption. A gray-haired man with a monocle, panting, a sense of urgency in his eyes. Lord Marcus, he reports, is nowhere to be found and Ian's assistance is needed. Ian anxiously paced. Lord Marcus, along with his son and the knights, had disappeared after yesterday's goblin hunt, and no one knew of their whereabouts. Ian strained his memory, sifting through past life experiences, searching for a hint about their possible location. But nothing came to mind. He was certain, however, that it was not their time to meet their end. He distinctly remembered Lord Marcus being assassinated by a rival empire on the brink of a grand war, an event which happened at a later date. Following his father's demise, Lord Marcus's son would renounce the Magrian territory to avoid the war. His fate was sealed later when he was executed for his crimes. Each territory in the empire was supposed to have a magician for protection and counsel. Urgently, Ian suggested the man seek their magician's assistance. But the man's grim news that their resident magician had been dispatched on another mission and was absent from Magrian territory left them unguarded. Stunned, Ian pondered the rarity of a magician deserting his assigned territory. Could this be linked to him? Could his actions have inadvertently altered the timeline? He speculated if the missing magician was revealing information about him to the formidable Tower Master, Herbert. That could spell danger. Currently, Ian's knowledge of future events was his most potent weapon. A disrupted timeline could render him powerless. Ian, understanding the grave consequences if Lord Marcus died, reassured the man he would help search for the missing lord. Swiftly, Ian prepared to venture out, cloaking himself against the night. A familiar voice halted him. It was his mother, visibly anxious, arguing the dangers of his mission. After all, he was still a child. Ian comforted her, assuring her of his newfound magical abilities and promising to return safely. Suddenly, Lord Marcus's daughter, filled with desperation, pleaded with Ian to retrieve her missing parents. She promised him any reward: wealth, land, servants, whatever he desired. As he listened, Ian's eyes fell on a peculiar ring on her finger, radiating with mana. He promised to fulfill her request, asking for the ring in return to aid him in his quest. The ring, he explained, could be instrumental in tracking her parents. Hesitant yet hopeful, she agreed and handed over the ring. As Ian slipped the ring onto his finger, recognition dawned upon him. This was the Magrian ring he had seen in his previous life, a modest artifact known to enhance the wearer's mana. It appeared the Lord had bequeathed it to his daughter. She made Ian promise to return it, stating its emotional significance. Now equipped with the mana-boosting ring and a team of knights, Ian was ready to embark on his mission to locate the lost lord. The mystical Magrian ring will serve as a counterbalance to his scarcity of mana. Our protagonist is escorted by knights to the last known location of Marcus. The scene is a grisly one, littered with the lifeless bodies of goblins. However, there is no trace of any humans. The knights deduce that a larger monster may have swept them away. A contemplative Ian rubs his chin. Assuming the missing group was ensnared by a horde of goblins, Ian races against time to locate them. He commences a magical incantation, intending to summon a wolf. A dazzling light obscures his actions, leaving the Night's Watch in a state of awe. The result of the spell, much to their surprise, is a small, adorable wolf, its fur fluffy and tail wagging merrily. In Ian's past life, the result was a formidable wolf, making him realize his summoning powers aren't yet at their peak. Pointing towards a patch of blood on the ground, he commands the wolf to trace the scent. The wolf obliges, sniffs the area, and begins to lead the way. The perspective then shifts to Lord Marcus, who is battling goblins bravely. These creatures are grotesque, with their long tongues, pointed noses, green skin, and glowing red eyes. Marcus and his party are besieged from all directions. The dire situation threatens their imminent extinction. Marcus instructs his son to seek refuge in the castle while he distracts the goblin horde. Amidst their conversation, An unsuspecting goblin advances from behind, wielding a club. A warning cry from the sun comes too late, as the goblin has already prepared to strike Lord Marcus, who is oblivious to the looming danger. Suddenly, a frosty burst envelops the vicinity, freezing all foes in their tracks. The lush greenery transforms into an Arctic scene, leaving everyone perplexed. The source of this miraculous event is Ian, whose timely arrival spares Lord Marcus and preserves the course of history. Taken aback by this unexpected intervention and the sight of a child rescuing him, Marcus succumbs to unconsciousness. Upon regaining consciousness, Marcus finds himself safe within the castle walls, his daughter dutifully by his side. She narrates the tale of Ian's heroic rescue. Both Marcus and his son have been in a restorative sleep for 2 days. An elderly man, Hogger, presumed to be the butler, walks in, pleased to see Marcus awake. He regretfully reports the loss of 12 soldiers, news that deeply distresses Marcus. The request arrives for Ian's presence, and Hagger, swift as ever, darts towards the training grounds to relay the message. There, he finds Ian, our protagonist, deep in his regimen. "The Lord has awoken," he announces. "He wishes to see you in the reception room. He has much to discuss." Ian, puzzled at the possible contents of such a meeting, follows Hagger inside nonetheless. Upon entering, Ian is greeted by Marcus and his son, Lobi. Overwhelmed with gratitude, they thank Ian from the deepest corners of their hearts for his act of courage. The Lord expresses his appreciation, emphasizing that Ian safeguarded both the present and future of Magrian leadership. More than that, Ian defended their territory by vanquishing the goblin threat. As a sign of gratitude, Marcus gestures towards an ornate box on a nearby table, intending it for Ian. Within the box lies the Magrian ring that Ian had borrowed for his quest. Marcus had heard whispers of Ian detecting mana within it. He always believed it to be an old family heirloom and wonders about its true power. Ian elucidates. "It's a ring that amplifies the wearer's mana. It was instrumental in my battle against the goblins." Marcus insists that Ian keep the ring, considering it a symbol of commitment. A commitment that the Magrian family will forever regard Ian as an honored guest, standing ready to serve him. Their home will always be open to Ian, and they will rally to his side in times of need. As Marcus and Lobi lower their heads in deference, they pledge this promise to endure across generations, for a millennium and beyond. In return, Ian expresses his gratitude, inquiring if there's an alchemist capable of creating elixirs within their territory. Larcus reveals the presence of Letio, an alchemist residing in Royd Village, who relocated from the capital in pursuit of a rare medicinal herb. Letio's name rings familiar to Ian from his past life. Knowing he requires elixirs to compensate for his limited mana levels, Ian forms a party of knights and embarks on a journey to Royd Village. Upon reaching their destination, they are met with a sight that chills their bones. Pointing towards the settlement engulfed in flames, one knight utters in shock, "The village ... it burning." The unsettling scenario playing out in the village is grim. An eye-patch-wearing bandit, a bloody hatchet slung over his shoulder, directs his men to seize the children for their next move. One boy, Douglas, is forcefully taken, his pleas echoing across the chaos. As his father cries out in desperation, the heartbreaking plea to spare his son from the horrors resonates through the burning air. The ominous figure with the eye patch emerges behind Douglas's father, striking with a swift and vicious kick that sends him sprawling. Pressing his boot against the fallen man's back, he effectively immobilizes him. Douglas battles fiercely against the paralyzing grip of another villain, but his struggles are futile. The eye-patched villain unsheathes a knife, a cruel glint in his eye. He announces his intention to murder Douglas's father as retribution for his resistance. As he raises his weapon, ready to strike, an unexpected shard of ice materializes from thin air, hurtling towards the villain. It pierces his back, knocking him out cold. Trapped in the vice-like grasp of another thug, Douglas can do nothing but witness the miraculous intervention. The remaining villains pause in confusion and shock. An ice shard has inexplicably materialized on this sunny day. Suddenly, the sky opens up, and an icy rain descends like divine retribution. The henchmen scatter in panic, the image of their defeated leader burning in their minds. Unbeknownst to them, our protagonist is perched atop a nearby cliff, watching the scene unfold. His newly acquired ring radiates power. Its effects have bolstered his mana tremendously. Gazing at the mysterious ring, He wonders if it could elevate his abilities to rival those of a third-class magician. He descends from his vantage point to join the villagers mourning their lost compatriots. Fortunately, none of the knights were harmed. Ian's thoughts turn to Letio, the alchemist they were sent to protect. Hearing Letio's name echoing in the distance, Ian swivels around. It's Douglas, and to Ian's surprise, his father is the alchemist they sought. But Letio's condition is dire. Brushing past Douglas, Ian examines Letio more closely. With a pallid complexion and streaks of white hair, it's clear Letio suffers from mana poisoning, also known as God's curse. This occurs when an individual, possessing a mana brain but not a mana heart, is exposed to an excess of mana, causing the overflow to assault the brain with unbearable pain. Ian knows it's unlikely that Letio would intentionally inflict such harm on himself, concluding this must be the malevolent work of another magician. Ian reaches out, attempting to soothe Letio's agony. The pain lessens, but Ian realizes there's nothing more he can do. He prepares to depart, leaving the villagers to their sorrow. Douglas, a young boy, clings onto Ian, desperation creeping into his voice as he asks about his father's condition. Regrettably, Ian confesses that his curse is incurable, and that he could only provide a fleeting relief. The pain will return, relentless and brutal, leaving his father with two harsh options: either live under the continuous care of a magician, or face death. This news shatters Douglas, leaving him visibly distraught. Abruptly, Douglas expresses his urgent need to find a unique flower, claiming it has the power to neutralize the mana within his father. With a sense of urgency, he pushes past Ian and sprints towards his goal. It's then that a flicker of recognition sparks in Ian's mind. Douglas. He'd heard that name before. In his previous life, Douglas was an unparalleled alchemist in the entire empire. Despite a challenging childhood, Douglas's genius propelled him to a position of power as the emperor's trusted confidant. However, a seething resentment for magicians consumed him after his father fell prey to a magician's poison. This resentment might have even driven him to assist in poisoning Ian in their past life. With this realization, Ian immediately races after Douglas, catching him and insisting that he must not venture into the forest alone due to the potential threat of bandits. Douglas resists, arguing that without the flower, his father is doomed. A single tear rolls down his cheek. Seeing that the boy is resolute, Ian reluctantly uses his magic to lull him into a deep slumber. Within seconds, Douglas's body goes limp, falling onto Ian's shoulder. Ian carries the unconscious boy to a hidden spot behind some bushes. As he lays him down, he battles with a disturbing thought. Should he eliminate Douglas now, preventing the production of the deadly poison in the future? But he quickly reels himself back. Acting impulsively could disastrously alter the timeline. After all, Douglas bears the potential to become the greatest alchemist in the Empire's history, and perhaps, just maybe, Ian could sway him to become an ally. Yet even then, there's no guarantee of undying loyalty. Ian's thoughts are jolted back to the present by one of the knights approaching to check on his well-being. Seeing Douglas on the ground, confusion crosses the knight's face. Ian swiftly explains that he had put Douglas to sleep to prevent him from acting recklessly amidst the lingering threat of bandits. Ian signals to the guard, it's time to return him to the village. With that, he strides off into the forest, leaving the knight questioning his departure. I have a task to complete. Alone, he assures the puzzled guard. The scene transitions to a moonlit village. Within this tranquil setting, Letio seeks out Douglas, who is now conscious and recuperating in his bed. Rumor has it that Douglas attempted a reckless deed earlier. As Douglas concedes his endeavor to locate a rare, potentially helpful flower, Letio admonishes his son for such a dangerous gamble, particularly given the persistent bandit threat. Douglas, frustration simmering, retorts, "Then what choice do we have? They've been on a fruitless quest for this elusive flower for more than a year. Without it, Letio faces certain death." Overwhelmed, Douglas questions the very existence of the flower. His teary outburst is interrupted by an unfamiliar voice from outside their humble dwelling. Simultaneously, they swivel their heads towards the voice, an unspoken, "Who's there?" etched on their faces. The stranger, a figure veiled in a cloak, steps into the moonlight. He claims to have information about the flower they're desperately seeking, the rare Randy's flower. Upon entering the house, he casts off his cloak, revealing himself to be none other than Ian, their evening's unanticipated visitor. he lays an object on the table. The realization dawns upon Letio. The object is a perfectly preserved Randy's flower, magically encased in ice. Ian proposes a deal, the flower for an answer. He seeks the origins of their knowledge about this obscure potent flower. A hesitant Letio discloses a family secret, an ancient book inherited from his father that contains a wealth of uncharted botanical lore. He turns to a dog-eared page, reciting the description of Randy's flower, a mysterious plant indigenous to the northern lands known for its mana-neutralizing properties. This elusive flower, with its 12 vivid purple petals, is highly toxic. Extracting it without causing it to wither instantly is a near impossible task. Letio further reveals his family's lineage in alchemy, passed down from generation to generation. Ian then unveils another property of the flower. It can act as a lethal poison to magicians possessing both a mana heart and a mana brain. Letio vehemently asserts that his family would never weaponize this knowledge to harm others. His solemn oath echoes in the quiet room. They will not brew any potion that could potentially harm magicians. His family's honor, he vows, remains intact. Ian's gaze finds Douglas across the room, a tremor of apprehension visible in his expression. As the conversation veers onto a path less tread, Ian delicately picks up a flower, starting to melt the ice encasing it. He expresses his gratitude to the alchemist for his insights while simultaneously apologizing once the ice dissolves to nothingness. The bloom wilts, its brief life extinguished. Ian confesses his failure in harvesting it correctly, having preserved merely its external form through freezing. Betrayal etches into Letio's face, the weight of disappointment pressing heavily on him. Was this some twisted jest? Ian, our protagonist, had presented the flower solely to demonstrate his ability to locate it. He extends a proposition to the alchemist, his commitment to ease his suffering with magic, while concurrently exploring methods to successfully harvest the elusive flower. The trade-off? Letio must accompany him to the capital, crafting unique elixirs to counter Ian's mana deficit, as well as potential medicinal concoctions for his ailing mother. Confusion clouds Letio's mind. Why him, he queries, when his proficiency in alchemy was far from impressive? Ian is adamant about needing a constant companion, capable of tailoring specific elixirs. He urges the alchemist to deliberate, taking into consideration his own kin. Earlier that day, Douglas had nearly risked his life in pursuit of the flower, a reckless endeavor Ian wished to prevent from recurring. Letio, in quiet discussion with his son, is observed by our thoughtful protagonist. Ian's mind is ensnared by memories of his past life. Letio, meeting a gruesome end at the hands of a malevolent magician, and Douglas, falling prey to the ruthless bandits. This unfortunate chain of events led him to cross paths with Emperor Ragnar, sparking a deep-seated loathing for magicians, culminating in the concoction of the poison that ended Ian's life. Observing Letio and Douglas, Ian resolves to rewrite history, ensuring they lead wholesome lives. Dawn ushers in the new day, and Ian prepares for his impending journey to the capital. A night approaches, confirming that the preparations are in order, awaiting his command. A sigh escapes Ian, disappointment heavy in his heart. The silence from the alchemist suggests a negative response to his proposition. As he stands on the threshold of departure, the door creaks open, revealing Letio and Douglas. Their decision made, they choose to accompany him. Confronted with a lack of alternatives, they opt to embrace the unfamiliar path. Douglas's gaze finds Ian, his voice echoing with an earnest inquiry. Could Ian truly lift his father's curse? A smile graces Ian's lips as he assures the young boy, vowing to honor his commitment. The declaration instills a sense of joy in Douglas, prompting him to address Ian as boss. Though this unsettles Ian slightly, he acquiesces, embracing this newfound relationship. Ian finds the newfound cheer in Douglas baffling, having always known him as an unyielding curmudgeon. One of the knights interjects, suggesting an immediate return to the Lord's castle. News has arrived. Prince Hayden has navigated the treacherous waters of Gamma's River and is set to arrive shortly. Ian reels from this sudden information, stunned by their swift travel and belated notification. If he is to meet them in time, he'll need a mount, and so he requests the knight's steed. Approaching the majestic horse, he employs his magic to coax the beast into cooperation, pleading for swift return to the castle. The animal dips its grand stature to the earth, permitting Ian easy access to the saddle. Once mounted, He faces the alchemist and the remaining crew, suggesting they leisurely follow while he ventures ahead. He steels himself, preparing to dash into the horizon's embrace. The scene shifts to the traveling prince, his white carriage a stark contrast to the soldier-clad surroundings. Inside the carriage, Prince Hayden is ensnared in a mesh of thoughts. He recollects a recent conversation with his father. The Emperor had confided that one of the rival princes has gained favor with the influential Tower Master Herbert. Allegiances in these corridors of power could tip scales, and at present, Herbert seems more inclined towards the fifth prince, Ragnar, as the crown's successor. The Emperor had warned Hayden, secure Ian's support or risk losing his position to his brother. Lost in the memory of this conversation, Hayden feels his stress simmer into rage. The support for his claim to the throne from Ivory Tower's magicians is thinning, replaced by favor for his brother Ragnar. He fantasizes about his potential reign as emperor, envisioning a purge of the obstinate magicians and their master Herbert from Ivory Tower. An additional revelation comes to light. Prince Hayden's last-minute notification to Lord Marcus about his imminent visit was no accident but a cunning plan. The prince smirks in solitude, pondering over how the esteemed Magrian lord will manage preparations for his unexpected arrival within the scant span of 2 days. It's evident that this prince is not your conventional hero, but a character with a darker persona. A whirlwind of frenzied activity engulfs Lord Marcus's castle, a scene awash with urgency. Marcus, with a commanding presence, directs his maids in an exhaustive mission to expunge every speck of dust. Nothing less than perfection would be acceptable for the visiting prince. The unexpected arrival of the royal guests has sent ripples of surprise through the castle. Marcus barely has time to gather his thoughts. His faithful butler, Hogger, steps forward, bearing news of the arrival of the majority of their distinguished guests. The prince is but a few moments away. Yet the protagonist, the linchpin of this entire affair, is conspicuously absent. Marcus, feeling the burden of impending doom, grapples with the idea of greeting the prince without Ian, the individual whose presence alone lured the prince to their doorstep. Soon, the grandiose carriage of Prince Hayden comes into sight, flanked by a legion of horses and knights. Hayden alights from the carriage, resplendent in a sweeping white cape and a royal blue jacket, his demeanor oozing the confidence of a man walking the red carpet. Despite the prince's arrival, Marcus's countenance remains etched with worry, knowing Ian is still missing. In a twist of fate, just as the moment of formal greetings nears, a horse cantered into view, bearing a rather nonchalant Ian. A sheepish apology follows his tardy arrival, adding a touch of levity to the otherwise formal proceedings. With Ian by his side, Marcus steps forward to extend their greetings to Prince Hayden. Hayden's gaze fixates on Ian, curiosity piqued by the rumors of the child magician. Ian, for his part, remains silent, using the moment to study Hayden's visage and the retinue accompanying him. Among them, a familiar face, Cecilia, a spy from another empire in his past life. As the guests filter into the castle, Prince Hayden is seen savoring a glass of wine, in the company of Oliver, captain of the Second Imperial Knight Order. Despite the fine wine, Hayden is far from pleased, expressing his disdain for everything around him, including our protagonist. Oliver wisely remains silent, avoiding any comments that could stoke Hayden's ire further. In another part of the castle, Cecilia, the Coldwood Empire spy, goes about her mission, to validate the rumors about Ian, and if found true, to abduct both him and his mother. Her search for Ian leads her to the castle's training grounds, where she finds him, diligently practicing even at the witching hour. Seeing him engrossed, Cecilia prepares a surprise magic attack, intending to test the rumored prodigious skills. As she launches a barrage of magic missiles, Ian, ever the skilled magician, responds swiftly with a defensive shield. Ian spins around abruptly, questioning the strange manner of her greeting. The woman, chuckling lightly, confesses to a small jest played upon a junior. Yet Ian's expression turns grave as he utters her name, Cecilia Coldwalker, causing her smile to falter. Her playful facade crumbles, leaving her questioning how Ian discovered her identity. With an almost malevolent grin, Ian responds that he, of course, knows her name. After all, in his past life, he eradicated all the Coldwalker spies hiding within the Empire. He begins to approach Cecilia slowly, uttering the names of the spies lurking in their midst. Shock ripples through Cecilia, driving her backwards. Ian's uncanny knowledge strikes her as madness, leaving her blindsided. Reality soon strikes, reminding Cecilia of her superior age and power as a magician compared to the young Ian. A triumphant smile replaces her shock as she conjures a fire attack, unleashing a wave of flames at the young adversary. Triumphantly, she taunts Ian's naivety, thinking his knowledge of her spy status could save him. She assumes victory until the crunch of footsteps emerges from the incandescent blaze. Ian stands there, alive and steaming, leaving Cecilia speechless. Ian begins his counterattack, summoning magic power. Cecilia's gaze darts skyward, her eyes widening in disbelief at Ian's mysterious strength. As ice crystals blot out the moonlight, ready to shower down, Ian reveals his anticipation of her arrival and his preparations at the training grounds. With a single gesture, Ian hurls the icy projectiles towards Cecilia, who hurriedly summons a protective shield. The ice hammers against her protection, causing fractures to spiderweb across its surface. Cecilia can only watch as her shield disintegrates under the relentless assault. Unfazed, Ian transitions to the second phase of his attack, summoning a gargantuan fireball. With a determined thrust, he sends the flaming mass, triple his size, hurtling toward his enemy. Cecilia's teeth clench in desperation, her protective barrier eroding under Ian's onslaught. Attacks break through her defense, slashing her arms and legs. Realizing her defense is on the verge of collapse, Cecilia braces herself as the fireball bears down upon her. Her escape is met with a thud as she collapses, body lacerated and a gash gracing her cheek. As she takes stock of her injuries, Cecilia assumes the worst is over. Surely the chaos must have drawn others to the scene. Yet, as Ian steadily approaches, he unveils his intentions to unmask her true nature, exposing Cecilia Coldwalker, the spy. Cecilia gazes around, confident in her veil of innocence. After all, who would trust a child over her word? Contrarily, Ian grins, hinting at secrets even Cecilia is unaware of. No sooner than the tension escalates, the esteemed knight Captain Oliver and his retinue arrive, eager to defuse the situation. The crowd hastens to Cecilia's aid, tending to her apparent wounds and helping her regain her footing. Boldly, Ian confesses, claiming the responsibility for her injuries. This sudden revelation spins every head in his direction. He weaves a compelling tale of a masked stranger, an assassination attempt on him by Cecilia, all rooted in her fear of exposure. Captain Oliver, although skeptical, is intrigued by Ian's insistence on the presence of a specific marking, supposedly a brand worn by the Coldwalker spies. Challenging propriety, Oliver orders a search for this alleged brand on Cecilia, causing a wave of protest. Two indignant men attempt to shield her, denouncing the move as inappropriate, but Oliver, with the prince's safety at stake, remains unyielding. A group of knights approach Cecilia, carrying out the contentious order as the room falls silent. Post the examination, a wounded and grim-looking Cecilia presents a stark contrast to her former confidence. Despite their thorough search, the knights report a lack of any suspicious markings, casting doubt on Ian's claims. With a determined gaze, Oliver turns to Ian, seeking the truth. Unwavering, Ian maintains his assertion and approaches Cecilia, placing his hand on her back. He utters a magical incantation, and a radiant blue light pulses from his fingertips. A ripple of apprehension crosses Cecilia's face as she questions his actions. Suddenly, an emblem, a circle enclosing a triangle adorned with cryptic symbols, materializes on her neck. It was an indication unknown even to Cecilia, making Ian's triumphant smile all the more satisfying. The Coldwalkers, he divulges, are branded in infancy before being sent off for training, a secret he uncovered from an administrator in his past life. The revelation stuns Oliver and his companions, but the mysterious symbol remains an enigma to them. Considering the circumstances, he decides to prioritize Cecilia's medical care before seeking further answers. He instructs two nearby magicians to prepare a mana prison, a precaution to prevent any possible escape attempts by Cecilia, while the truth is still shrouded in mystery. Turning towards Ian with an air of solemnity, Oliver's figure is dramatically backlit by the glittering starscape above. His sword gleams ominously in its sheath. His vow hangs heavy in the air. If Ian's account rings true, he'd be duty-bound to convey it to His Majesty without delay. And that's exactly what unfolds. No detours, no hesitations. Oliver heads straight for Prince Hayden, relaying the astonishing victory of our young protagonist over Cecilia, a formidable third-class magician. Hayden, to his surprise, finds himself impressed. He hadn't anticipated such prowess from a mere child. He consults Oliver, probing his thoughts about Ian. Oliver confirms the whispers about Ian's talent, yet notes a peculiar maturity in his demeanor, unusual for his age. Intrigued, the prince yearns to meet the boy personally. Within a short span, Oliver escorts Ian into the royal presence. Bowing in deference, Ian respectfully greets the prince. Hayden discloses his knowledge of Ian's recent exploit, revealing and overcoming a spy from the Ivory Tower, an act that greatly served the Empire. In recognition of Ian's service, Hayden offers a reward, inviting Ian to voice his desires. A hint of suspicion flickers in Ian's eyes. He conjectures the prince's ulterior motive, an attempt to gauge his intentions, perhaps? Meeting Hayden's gaze, Ian requests, should the prince permit, a visit to the ancient site of the Ivory Tower on their journey to the Imperial castle. Hayden is left bemused. Why would a child request a visit to the long-abandoned Ivory Tower as his reward? Yet, moved by Ian's earnest desire to see a place he'd only ever heard of, he consents. A self-satisfied smile plays on Ian's lips. His goal is now within his grasp, much sooner than expected. Hidden in the deepest recesses of the old Ivory Tower is a treasure beyond measure, the Dragon Tongue Book. In his past life, the language inscribed within this tome was integral to his temporal magic research. Its pages held the secrets of time magic. Though discovered a few years prior to his demise, Ian had deciphered only a fragment of its content. Now, he wonders how much more he could unearth, given the opportunity to study it from a tender age. As dusk sets in, they commence their journey towards the majestic Imperial castle. Vanessa, Ian's mother, bubbles over with excitement at her first voyage beyond Megrian Letio. The alchemist, a mischievous glint in his eyes, teases Vanessa, promising to be her guide once they reach the capital. Long entrenched in the hustle and bustle of the capital, he has become part of its lifeblood. Vanessa, cheeks glowing with a soft blush, expresses her gratitude towards the kindly alchemist. Ian watches this unfold, silent and contemplative, questioning the intentions of this stranger flirting with his mother. Their exchange is broken by the intrusion of the vice-captain of the Knights, Paul, with his captivating green eyes and an unusual blue ribbon wrapped around his torso. He announces their arrival at a detour, an archaeological site of the old Ivory Tower. Their stay here will span 2 days, during which, Paul informs Ian, he is free to explore the echoes of history around the ancient site. Guiding them to a quaint neighboring village, Paul arranges their accommodations for the ensuing nights. The village, serene and charming in its simplicity, is not the typical locale you'd expect for housing royalty. The local villagers, agog with excitement, warmly welcome the prince, expressing their honor to play hosts. Hayden, with sincere appreciation, reciprocates their kindness. This camaraderie catches Ian off guard. In his past life, he knew the prince to be perennially hostile and gloomy, forever casting him scornful glances. This was largely due to Ian's frequent proximity to his brother, Prince Ragnar, perceived by Hayden as a threat to his future imperial position. But now, seeing Hayden's radiant smiles and easy conversations with the common folk, not just nobility or royalty, a flicker of comprehension ignites within Ian. He begins to understand the Emperor's unmistakable fondness for Hayden. Suddenly, a voice pierces through his musings. It's Douglas, eager to know when Ian plans to venture into the old Ivory Tower. He hopes to accompany him. With a resigned sigh, Ian anticipates the unlikelihood of locating the elusive book in the tower's basement. Yet he can't deny Douglas's request, and acquiesces, which incites palpable excitement in Douglas's wide eyes. Their parents observe the siblings' interaction from afar, their hearts swelling with joy at this harmonious bond. Letio, intrigued, asks Vanessa if Ian has always exhibited such maturity, contrasting the typical behavior of 12-year-olds. Vanessa's response is layered with pride and melancholy. She shares that Ian's maturity came early, often reminiscent of her late husband. He's always been thoughtful and considerate, silently trying to fill the void his father's absence has left in their family. Preon, Ian's father, was an ordinary man, unlike the magician his son has become. He disappeared mysteriously one ordinary workday before Ian's birth, only leaving behind a cache of items received 5 years later. That mysterious departure of Preon was like a man going to fetch milk, only to never return, before his child even came into existence. As Vanessa gazes at her son, words begin to falter, her voice faltering. She confides that she has perceived a subtle change in Ian recently. Letio, sensing her concern, attempts to provide comforting reassurances. Vanessa casually waves off the ominous feelings that crept upon her, choosing to believe it's nothing more than a trick of her mind. Preparing for the hustle and bustle that the morrow would bring, they surrender themselves to the beckoning night, surrendering their worries to the embrace of dreams. In his past life, Ian was akin to a leaf carried by the wind, guided by the twinkling stars. The war that unified nations had reached its conclusion, and he had said his goodbyes to the Ivory Tower and the Emperor. With no particular destination, he embarked on a journey into the unknown. It was on this whimsical journey that he happened upon the relic of the Ivory Tower and discovered the book secreted away in its subterranean vault. Reflecting on it, he can't help but wonder if it was pure happenstance, or perhaps something more, an invisible hand guiding his steps. Now, he stands in that very spot, but in the shell of his boyhood. An uncanny familiarity stretches before him, mirroring the time 3 centuries ago when the Ivory Tower's mages clashed with the Dragonians, the dragon's bloodline. The Dragonians were a force to be reckoned with. Their gargoyle squadron, armed with potent dark magic, posed a formidable threat to the Empire. Yet Mitchell, a gifted mage and prince of the Empire, rallied the Ivory Tower against them. His leadership ensured the suppression and subsequent extinction of the gargoyles, securing peace within the Empire's borders. Despite being hailed as a hero, Mitchell shunned the prospect of the throne, choosing instead the serene isolation of the Ivory Tower. A new tower was erected in the heart of the capital, leaving the old one to fade into oblivion. Time weathered its grandeur, reducing it to an overlooked monument of the past. Ian navigates through the ruins, memories guiding him towards a concealed passage. With a simple incantation, the secret entrance gives way to a descending staircase shrouded in darkness. Treading the worn steps, Ian reaches the bottom. A flick of his hand brings forth magical light, revealing a room untouched by the sun's rays for centuries. Dominating the room is a gargoyle statue, wings spanned wide, fangs menacingly bared. His initial encounter with the statue had taken him by surprise, but this time, he is prepared. Suddenly, the gargoyle stirs. Its eyes blaze with an eerie purple glow, a roar reverberates through the room, and it lunges at Ian. In his previous life, Ian was caught unprepared by the reanimated gargoyle he had assumed extinct. But now, armed with the wisdom of his past, he retaliates by conjuring a sphere of water and hurling it at the stony beast. The gargoyle crashes into a nearby wall but recovers quickly. In his past life, one blow would have sufficed. But now, restricted by his present capabilities, he recognizes the need for greater force. As the gargoyle rallies for a second assault, Ian readies his next move, a barrage of ice spears that emerge from the ground, impaling the gargoyle's rocky form. With a crackling blast, he called forth a bolt of electricity, searing through the air to strike the monstrous gargoyle. The golden arcs of power echoed a triumphant victory. Engulfed by a chilling shroud of ice, the smoky residue billowed from its defeated form. As anticipated, a hidden passageway emerged from the gloom to his right. Tossing caution to the wind, Ian plunged into the abyss, casting a cushioning spell to counteract the force of the fall. There it was, the object of his perilous quest. Isolated on a pedestal, a shaft of light cut through the darkness to illuminate the tome. Ian was at the destination sooner than he had dared to hope. The mythical Dragon Tongue manuscript lay within arm's reach. Its origin, whether from dragon lore or a pioneer wizard's creation, mattered little now. The book was his. Ian cradled the book carefully. Inscribed in an enigmatic dragon tongue, a language he had barely begun to decipher in his previous existence, this book held the promise of limitless power. His heart lurched when he discovered the pages were blank. Panic surged through him, his fingers flying through the empty leaves in frenzied disbelief. A devastating realization descended upon him. The book was vacant because he had used it in his past life. Manipulating time must have scrubbed the pages clean. He shut the book, a wave of disappointment washing over him. Yet fragments of the magical script danced in his mind, and he attempted to recite them, only to find his voice remained silent. Dragon Tongue was no ordinary language. It was an arcane script demanding robust magical command to articulate. Ian stared pensively at the book. He wouldn't be able to trigger the temporal magic again, precluding any return to the past. The assumption of infinite do-overs shattered. This second chance at life suddenly held a newfound gravity. Days rolled by, and Ian found himself completing the last leg of his voyage to the capital. Surveying the panorama from his carriage, he admired the sturdy stone structures towering high, and the bustling populace seemingly content. His gaze strayed to an accompanying carriage, where Cecilia sat, trapped within a cage. Ensuring Cecilia remained captive was paramount. Her escape would likely lead her back to the Coldwood Empire, spelling trouble for Ian by exposing his inside knowledge. The group pressed on towards the Imperial castle, the city opening up around them. However, their passage was abruptly barred. Standing tall at the gates was Herbert, the Tower Master, flanked by an imposing line of magicians. Defiantly, Oliver disembarks his steed, questioning the audacity of Herbert obstructing their route to the castle. As the Tower Master, Herbert declares he's operating under explicit orders to oversee all aspects of Cecilia's investigation. Oliver is skeptical. He finds it strange how Herbert secured an imperial order for such a purpose, even before Cecilia's arrival in the capital. With a firm pat on Oliver's shoulder, Herbert maintains that rebellions must be squashed swiftly, and the Ivory Tower is the appropriate institution to conduct the interrogation. Despite sensing a whiff of conspiracy, Oliver, bound by the direct order, instructs his men to hand over the alleged criminal, Cecilia, to the Tower Master. Hearing her branded as a criminal, Herbert whips around with stern solemnity. He insists that her guilt isn't confirmed yet. Therefore, she should receive the same respect as any magician. He advises Oliver to choose his words more carefully. The development doesn't sit well with the other knights either. Their efforts in capturing Cecilia seem to be in vain, as the Ivory Tower magicians intend to whisk her away. Ian, an astute observer, grasps the underlying motives. It's not about protecting one of their own. The Ivory Tower is simply reluctant to let the knights interrogate a fellow magician. Ian predicts Herbert's next move: Cecilia's incarceration in the most secure, impenetrable cell, effectively hindering any escape attempts. He peers out the carriage, his mother beside him, unperturbed as Cecilia is taken. A messenger then approaches Ian with a proposal to visit another location before heading to the Imperial Palace. Upon arrival, they are greeted by a majestic mansion, complete with a resplendent water fountain adorning the entrance. A sense of familiarity washes over Ian. In his past life, this mansion was a gift from Prince Ragnar. But this time, Prince Hayden is the benefactor, claiming the Emperor specifically arranged the mansion for Ian's stay. With humble gratitude, Ian acknowledges Hayden's magnanimity. Ironically, he had acquired this mansion as an adult at the age of 26 in his past life, and now, he stands as its owner as a mere child. Hayden then conveys that Ian's family can reside here temporarily, but they must now proceed to the Imperial Palace to meet the Emperor. Ian requests to first show his mother around their new residence. Hayden concedes, and they venture inside the mansion, leaving Ian's mother marveling at the opulence around her. The opulence is breathtaking, every corner sparkles with wealth. Vanessa gazes around, speechless, as Ian announces that this luxurious place is going to be their new home. She can hardly believe it. This grandeur, all theirs? Despite being a powerful magician in his previous life, he could never bring her back to life. But now that she's returned, everything has changed. He solemnly swears to do everything he previously wished for, to give her a life of normalcy and happiness, which eluded them in their past existence. Vanessa, ever the pragmatic one, is overwhelmed by the sheer size of their new home. Her first thoughts gravitate towards maintaining such a vast place. It's such a maternal instinct, this worry about cleanliness. When she voices her concerns, Ian quickly assures her that she will not be responsible for any housekeeping chores. He promises her a life of ease and comfort that she won't even think of cleaning. Their new mansion is a vision of elegance. A white bricked facade offset by a blue roof, expansive windows allowing sunlight to flood the rooms. As beautiful as it is, duty calls for Ian. It's time for him to meet the Emperor. He heads to the Imperial Palace, a structure that outdoes their mansion in grandeur. Red banners flutter in strategic places, and the symmetry of the architecture is striking. Ian is a bundle of nerves. Even in his past life, he had never faced the current Emperor alone. By the time he graduated from the Magic Academy, the Emperor was on his deathbed. He was reputed to be a man of exceptional judgment and wisdom. Ian can't help but anticipate this meeting. As he strolls through the palace, he catches sight of a familiar room across the courtyard. It's the quarters of the fifth prince, Ragnar. Ragnar, a concubine's son, bore the emperor's physical traits, but none of his temperament. He was ruthless and unsympathetic. As Ian's former friend turned nemesis, the one who had poisoned him, seeing Ragnar's room brought back old memories. As he approaches the emperor's chamber, thoughts of his impending encounter with Ragnar start to cloud his mind. He reaches the chamber door, and the guard gestures for him to enter. The time has come. The grand white and gold doors swing open, revealing Ian in his elegant attire, ready to face the emperor. Upon a towering throne of white marble, embellished with plush red cushions, sits the emperor. As Ian steps into the room, he instantly kneels in humility, offering his wishes of health and peace to the emperor. Emperor Terry, with a wave of his hand, tells Ian to rise, reminding him not to overdo his courtesies. Ian has accomplished so much in such a short span of time, making him feel that he doesn't need to worry about using proper manners. He recalls Prince Ragnar telling him the same thing in his previous life when they first met. Standing beside him is Terry, and next to Terry is his son, Prince Hayden, who excitedly waves and asks if Ian likes his new mansion. Ian is awestruck by its luxuriousness, surpassing all his expectations. Despite his nerves, he can't help but sweat in the presence of the royal family. Terry inquires if Ian understands the reason why he was brought here and why he received a mansion upon arrival. Ian is at a loss for words. Should he be direct and speak his mind, or should he hold back and show respect? He recalls that Prince Ragnar admired honesty and straightforwardness, and suspects the emperor might share the same sentiment. However, he ultimately decides it's too early to act confidently and chooses to continue behaving like a 12-year-old. In response to the emperor's question, Ian timidly suggests that he was brought here because of his modest talent. Terry crosses his arms, questioning if Ian truly believes all the trouble was taken just because of his unusual magic abilities. Prince Hayden intervenes, urging his father to be patient and reminding him that Ian is still a child with limited knowledge of politics. Terry lets out a sigh. It's true that the emperor summoned Ian because he recognized his remarkable abilities and valued his assistance in catching a spy. Seated on his throne, the emperor acknowledges that Ian deserves a reward for his achievements, regardless of his age, and that's why he brought him here. He asks Ian what he desires. Ian gazes down at the floor, having pondered this question extensively. Although his request may seem peculiar for an adult, as a child, he can get away with it. He tells Terry that he would love to explore the Imperial Palace and share the beauty with his mother. The emperor finds this request somewhat unusual, but Hayden explains that Ian also expressed a desire to visit the old Ivory Tower as it piqued his curiosity. After all, it's normal for children to be fascinated by such things. Granting Ian's wish, Terry hands him a special Imperial seal, a golden ticket-shaped object. With this, Ian will have access to most parts of the Imperial Palace, and if he presents it to a royal guard, they will guide him on his sightseeing adventure. The emperor adds that there are other rewards in store for Ian. Servants bring in a massive chest filled with gold. That thing looks incredibly heavy. I can't fathom how they managed to carry it, Ian remarked, amazed at the sight before him. The emperor had also bestowed upon him a group of maids, assuring him of a comfortable stay at his mansion. Ian was astonished, realizing that his mother would no longer have to worry about cleaning. Expressing his gratitude for the emperor's generosity, Ian bid farewell and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Taking a deep breath, he couldn't help but notice how different the emperor was from others. A sense of suspicion lingered in Ian's mind. Perhaps the emperor treated everyone in this peculiar manner, much like Ragnar did. Regardless, Ian knew he had to keep moving. Time was of the essence, and Ian had an urgent need for his Imperial seal. He ventured outside and approached a guard, showing him the seal while politely asking for directions to the garden. The guard complied, guiding him to his desired location, the safe haven of the Imperial family, a place Ian remembered from his previous life. Ragnar had described it as a sacred sanctuary reserved for those who served the Emperor and Empress, accessible only to the elite. Ian covertly sneaked inside, cautiously checking for guards. To his surprise, the few present were sound asleep, possibly the most negligent guards he had ever encountered. Ian quietly approached them, employing his magic to ensure their unconsciousness. He then began his search, intent on finding something of significance. Although his exact objective remained unclear, he believed it must be located near the first emperor's coffin. He meticulously scoured the area, utilizing his magic to illuminate his path, until finally stumbling upon his desired item. As he laid eyes on the object, a profound sense of astonishment overcame him. This was the very reason he had yearned to explore the palace. Before him lay the stoneheart mushrooms, brown-capped fungi protruding from the floor beside the coffin. Ian hurriedly made his way towards them, carefully harvesting the mushrooms and placing them inside a brown bag. He reasoned that this quantity should be sufficient for his needs. Suddenly, he caught the sound of voices drawing near, 2 individuals engaged in conversation. Ian swiftly extinguished his magic light and concealed himself, pondering who could be approaching. The dialogue unfolded between a worried magician, evidently aware of the inappropriateness of their presence, and Princess Harry, a striking figure with long blonde hair, adorned in a blue jacket over a white dress. She reassures the magician Kevin that they both have valid reasons for being there. However, the purpose of their presence remains unclear. Unbeknownst to them, Ian discreetly observes their interaction. Kevin expresses concern and believes that the Ivory Tower should be informed about their activities, but Harry insists that revealing the truth would be too perilous. Kevin then asks if Harry has memorized the basic spells he taught her, and she confidently confirms that she has. To demonstrate her magical abilities, Harry allows her mana to flow and summons a radiant ball of light. Ian watches in astonishment, unaware that Princess Harry possesses mana and recalling her tragic past. In his previous life, he remembers her being confined like a caged bird. Prince Hayden's execution by Emperor Ragnar shattered Harry's heart and led her to take her own life. It's unfathomable to Ian that the princess, who is concealing her magical talents from the Empire, commits such a serious crime. Kevin, the magician, must also be aware of the consequences, yet he agrees to assist her in practicing magic secretly, which is why they find themselves in this secluded location. Suddenly, Ian decides to leave, and as he departs, the duo becomes alert upon hearing a noise. Kevin panics, fearing they may be discovered. He suggests ending their practice for the day. However, Harry assures him that they are alone since only members of the Imperial family can enter. Ian manages to slip away unnoticed. Today, he has learned surprising and intriguing truths: Harry's hidden magical ability and her potential criminal offense. He concludes that she likely concealed her talent out of fear of the Ivory Tower. Herbert, the Tower Master, clearly favors Harry's brother Ragnar as the heir to the throne. If Harry, a powerful magician, were to be revealed, it could jeopardize Ragnar's claim and make her a target for assassination. Ian continues with his day, leaving the garden and expressing gratitude to the guard who had guided him earlier. The guard asks if he enjoyed himself, and Ian responds with a smile, confirming his enjoyment. Eagerly, he hurries back to his newly acquired mansion, excited to utilize the mushrooms he recently obtained. Upon entering, he is greeted by a butler who assists him with his jacket and introduces him to the alchemist, Letio. Letio informs Ian of everyone's whereabouts. Vanessa is in another room conversing with the new maids who arrived from the Emperor, while Douglas explores the mansion, marveling at its grandeur. Ian is delighted to hear that everyone is doing well and requests a private conversation with Letio. They retreat to a secluded room, and Ian ensures the door is closed tightly to prevent eavesdropping. With a serious expression, he gazes at Letio, making a secretive request for a special potion. Letio, bewildered, inquires about the type of potion needed and the reason for its secrecy. Our protagonist reveals a handful of stone heart mushrooms recently gathered, an extraordinary fungus that can numb nerves and even halt a beating heart. Retrieving them from a brown bag, he presents them to Letio. The alchemist's confusion deepens at the prospect of concocting a potion from such a poisonous substance. His purple eyes reflect his bewilderment, and his white-streaked hair falls across his face. Ian clarifies that he requires a potion to render him impervious to interrogation magic, a power employed by magicians to discern truth from lies. Standing before Letio, he asks if the alchemist can fulfill this extraordinary request. Though familiar with interrogation magic, Letio ponders the feasibility of creating a potion that can resist its effects. He explains that extensive experimentation will be necessary, and it will take a considerable amount of time. Our protagonist anticipates a response of this nature, acknowledging the challenge involved and encouraging Letio to do his best, emphasizing the importance of taking the necessary time. Meanwhile, a knock interrupts their conversation. A visitor awaits outside the door to their room. Ian opens the door to reveal a maid, who respectfully lowers her head while holding a tray bearing a letter addressed to him. Removing the letter from its envelope, he begins to read. The letter is from the Ivory Tower. It starts with, "Dear Magician Ian Page, much like the Imperial family, the Ivory Tower eagerly anticipates meeting you. We would like to schedule a meeting with you prior to your enrollment at the Academy. Your magical abilities already surpass those of an average magician, and it may be challenging for you to connect with students who are still mastering beginner's magic. Therefore, we propose a brief meeting exactly 1 week from today." Concern flickers across Ian's face after reading the letter. If he is to visit the magicians at the Ivory Tower soon, he needs to prepare. Changing his previous statement, he informs Letio that he will require the potion within a week and urges him to work swiftly. He needs it before his meeting at the Ivory Tower. Letio considers this task near impossible, even with sleep sacrifices, causing him to fret about how to accomplish it on time. Ian offers an apology, but insists that the potion must be ready in a week, regardless of the difficulty. He trusts Letio's skills and believes it can be done. Attending the Ivory Tower without this potion would be perilous,